yell at me. Because here's the deal.
You're
Can
supposed
I
to
explain myself?
Okay, go ahead.
And this is not to implicate anything.
Sure.
Daniel's desire is to have me wait until the music is done to start speaking.
Until Hutch is done singing.
You always talk over it.
Until Hutch is done singing, not the music.
Hutch is done singing, I agree.
Okay.
International recording superstar Eric Hutchinson, you got to hear his melodical voice. You got to hear the beautiful lyrics of the 06010 theme song. But I'm then with Field Yates here, Field Minister Yates, in which talking over the music is nice. In fact, I'd like the music bed to be longer. Could we get this music bed to be, I don't know, 60 minutes? That would be
60 minutes.
That would be great. I would like to have the music bed underneath the.
It's like lounge music. Like
honestly,
you're in an elevator for 42 floors.
Honestly, what I would like, because the music is so good, it just gives a kind of a pep.
Yeah.
You know, kind of gives an energy to it.
Right.
What I would like is for Thirsty Kyle to stand 6 feet behind me at all times playing it.
Oh, wow.
As I walk around campus.
Sure. Playing it on what?
It'll make all my conversations sound a little bit more peppy. Yeah, what do you got? Whoa.
There we go. I have no musical talent.
Do we have drops?
We got a couple drops, Field Yates.
We got a couple drops. All right, the whole crew is here today. I'm Field Yates. That is Matthew Berry, Daniel Dopp, as you saw, Kyle Soppe, you saw, and of course, we are joined today, as we always are, by Stephania Bell. And is it time now to reveal the poll answer, Daniel, or do you want to save that for the end of the show?
Boy, I think we do it off the top.
Okay, well, hello,
Yeah.
Stephania.
Off
Good morning,
the
and how
top
are
rope.
you?
Stephania, did you have a favorite before we reveal the results of the poll? Did you have a favorite of what we call your palatial estate?
I did. I like the Chateau de Cone because it sounds like wine.
Right.
And it's French.
Chateau de Cone. Stephania,
Chateau de Cone.
I have great news for you, Stephania.
Right.
It has absolutely nothing to do with the name of your home because it's not going to be called the Chateau de Cone. It's the NHL playoffs start today, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get to the poll results.
Yeah, what are the poll results?
The poll
Who's
results.
doing the poll?
And
Is it
Daniel,
Thirsty Kyle?
please
Is it
enlighten
Daniel?
us. Drum roll, please.
So here we go. 11.8% out of 2,660 votes. Work from Cone came in last place.
Surprising. Would have been my pick.
Thank goodness.
I liked work from Cone, but it doesn't describe
hated
the
it.
palatial estate that Stephania Bell, that somebody the stature of Star, capital S-T-A-R, Stephania Bell lives in.
All right, so here we go. Let me get through these next three real quick, and then you can talk about it. Chateau de Cone came in third with 19.6%. Bell Tower was second with 31.5%, and the Bellagio was 37%, far and away the winner. How do we feel about that?
All right. So Smart Brain tells me, hey, the Bellagio, like it's clear that Stephania lives in a palatial estate, right? It's grand, it's massive, it's welcoming to the most elite of elite people like
just
Stephania.
The Bellagio.
Exactly.
but I
what,
would've-
Stephania? What'd you
I
say?
said I have fountains.
You
You have
just like
fountains?
the Bellagio.
Really?
Like the Bellagio, she has
So
fountains.
I understand why that
So
was a choice.
again, Smart Brain, literal brain understands why it's the winner.
Yeah.
Just, podcast brain wanted to be, we're from Cone.
I'm going to say this. As the producer of the show,
Yeah.
I don't have any problem giving the final executive decision to Matthew Berry, who started this podcast 12 years ago
Fair
when
enough.
he was 85.
First off,
So
I'm
listen.
I'm just jealous. Field has a literal brain and a podcast brain.
I
like
know,
I'm working on
right?
I've got one half a brain. Like I don't know how he's got all these multiple brains. Like Thirsty Kyle, fill out a form for me to request a podcast brain. I didn't even know that was an option. I didn't even know that was an option.
I think you only have the podcast brain.
I may not. No, I don't have any. I'm the scarecrow. I've only had a brain.
It must be so nice in the Bellagio, but when we have Stephania on, obviously intermittently this year because of COVID restrictions, like what's happening when she's not on camera? Like is someone feeding her grapes? What do you think is taking place?
First off, I think she's in sweats. I'll tell you that much right now.
No.
No.
Yeah, I mean, like that's what I would
I
be.
have a skirt on today.
Business
really?
up top,
Yes,
sweats on bottom.
I would be
do.
in like I would be like the John Clayton Sports Center commercial. I would be 100% waist down. I would be comfortable. I don't know. Listen. Here's what I would say. I am worried, of course, about because eventually, we're gonna obviously we'll have T-shirts and then a Saturday morning cartoon series about this. I'm worried about copyright restrictions on the actual Bellagio. I don't want us to get sued. We don't have any kind of budget, and because Stephania Bell, she is the belle of the ball,
right?
As it were. She prefers Chateau de Cone, and I do believe in the entire history of the show, this is the first time that she is truly 100% embraced her coneness. So I am making an executive decision as bestowed upon me by Daniel D. Dopp that her palatial estate is the Chateau de Cone.
Ooh, interesting. Chateau de Cone it is.
Right? That's what we wanted, right? The Chateau de Cone.
I like it.
Okay. Chateau de
I
Cone.
love it.
Let us know when the housewarming party takes
It's the first time Cone
place.
has sounded good. It's the first time that Cone has sounded good. Maybe it's the French accent with it.
Wait,
Chateau
so
de
who has a,
Cone.
hey, who has a, one of us has a, and I know it's not me, one of us has a friend that has a winery, right? Who is it? Is that Daniel?
Yeah.
Secret Squirrel. Yeah, you have a friend that's a winery.
Yeah, my buddy Scott Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, can
Yep.
maybe can Scott? And I
Shout
know,
out to
and
Scott.
Stephania's told me this, that his wine is fantastic. Stephania's told me this off air. I know she really enjoys it. And can, even if it's just like a label, can we get a line of Chateau de Cone wine?
I'm pretty sure. So he runs a label called Mountain Tides. That's his wine, his stuff. So like, I'll talk to him and see if we can maybe get a Chateau de Cone special reserve. Something.
I think so.
Ooh,
Maybe we sell some of those bottles for Jimmy V Foundation or something. Try to raise some money.
Ooh, not a bad idea.
Do something fun with that.
Matthew Berry finding a way to do good for all. Stephania, we'll talk to you in just a few minutes. We're going to get started here with Double Trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble.
Double trouble. Double trouble.
As of this moment, they're on double secret probation.
Teams today are the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles, who, of course, battled it out for the NFC East Division crown last year. The Eagles won incredibly because of all the injuries they dealt with. It was just a miraculous finish to the season. Matthew?
I thought, you know what, and by the way, just real quickly off of that, I thought, and he didn't, I don't think he got any, I thought Doug Peterson should have been in the Coach of the Year conversation.
Which bucket, though? The Coach of the Year for a really dominant team?
No,
or
I mean,
the, guy who overachieved? Remember we established
Overachieved.
this.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I'm just overachieved. In the non-Bill Belichick, that was your thing. Mine is like it should be two divisions. It's the Bill Belichick division, and then it's every coach not named Bill Belichick.
Gotcha.
And I think in the non-Bill Belichick division, I mean, again, like they were rolling out AAF superstar Greg Ward as wide receiver 1 there towards the end. I
He
mean,
might
like
come up
I
on the show
thought,
today.
and their defense had tons of injuries off the line. Like I thought. Listen, and you guys know I'm a Washington fan, so it hates me to say, it pains me to say something positive. I thought Doug Peterson coached his butt off, last year.
He sure did.
I
So
thought he did a great job.
We'll put that on hold for now because we have to talk about the Cowboys. And Matthew, it's pretty generally accepted the top 2 quarterbacks in almost anybody's rankings this year, at ESPN or otherwise, are going to be Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Likely about 95% of the people are ranking Jackson ahead of Mahomes. That part's not interesting. 1 and 2. Where it gets interesting for quarterbacks this year is a third quarterback.
Right.
And who is the quarterback 3 in fantasy this year? And beyond that, where should that player be drafted? Which leads us right into Dak Prescott, Matthew, because last year, you know what he was? Quarterback 3, over 21 fantasy points per game. Do you believe that Dak Prescott should be viewed as the quarterback 3 going into this season amongst all quarterbacks? And if so, if there's a premium paid on Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott, is there one at all? On Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Is there one at all on Dak Prescott?
So first off, I think he's the number 3 quarterback this year. I don't think it's close.
Really? That part's interesting.
Yes. Now, do I think, and here's what I say by that. Listen, do I think that Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, do I think they will be close-ish to Dak Prescott in terms of production, assuming health for all of them? I do.
Okay.
But I don't think it's close in terms of who should get that number 3 spot. And I understand there are arguments for all of those guys. And Dak Prescott's currently going as quarterback 6 on ESPN.
Wow.
And when I published my first initial ranks and I had Dak as QB3, everyone was just like, what, Dak? Whoa, Dak at QB3? Suddenly some other people are starting to come around. But there were people that were arguing against it. And I still see this. Again, he's going as QB6 on ESPN. And I don't get it. To your point, this is a guy that was the 3rd best quarterback in fantasy last year. In fact, since Amari Cooper came to the Dallas Cowboys, he's the 2nd best quarterback in fantasy in terms of total points. He's the 4th best quarterback on a points per game basis. And we think about this year, where again, you have 0 preseason games. You only have 14 padded practices. What do I want? I want consistency. And so even though Mike McCarthy is the new head coach of the Cowboys, this is going to be the same offense. It's going to be the same offensive system. Kellen Moore is still there as the offense coordinator. They're going to be running the offense from last year, an offense in which Dak Prescott excelled. I have some good stats for you. I want to give you some Dak Prescott stats here. 11 different top 12 finishes at the position. Only Lamar Jackson was the only other quarterback to do that. So he gave you a high weekly 4, right? 10 different games with 20 or more fantasy points. That was 2nd most. 5 games with 25 or more fantasy points, tied for the 3rd most. Since he came into the NFL, he leads all quarterbacks in rushing touchdowns. I know his rushing touchdowns were down last year somewhat, but he didn't need to. Again, with Amari Cooper, with Michael Gallup, an emerging Blake Jarwin. And oh, by the way, they drafted CeeDee Lamb, who a number of people had as the best wide receiver coming out of this draft. They absolutely stole CeeDee Lamb. No one expected him to be there for the Cowboys when they picked. So all those weapons around for Dak, who is playing for a contract. You know, I mean, like, we know he's going to get paid,
Sure,
but right? I mean, like,
totally.
But he is betting on himself this year. So yeah, give me all the Dak this year.
So everything you said, I agree with. And by the way, it's funny how divisive of an evaluation Dak Prescott's become. Like, he's worth the big money. Like, he is going to be paid gobbles of money. Let's establish that much. He's an excellent player. And we'll talk about Carson Wentz in just a little bit. But you mentioned how it's not just the same offensive system, but part of the reason that a quarterback needs to be very productive in fantasy football and in real life is his defense is not very good. The Cowboys are loaded up. I think they have the most talent, top to bottom, on offense in the NFL. The most talent.
Yeah.
The defense, it's a chemical imbalance, right? So they're going to have to score a lot of points this year. Dak Prescott's going to have to throw the football a lot, and he has all the ingredients in place to once again be a top four quarterback in my estimation. Only last thing I want to establish, Matthew, is, and I don't know where his ADP overall is, but if his
sixth round
is what Kyle says. So we've talked about how maybe Lamar Jackson's middle of the third round, depending on league size. Patrick Mahomes, maybe end of the third round. Where do you think Dak Prescott, like, if you were without a quarterback and we hit the round?
I have Jackson and Mahomes
times?
pretty close to each other. So I would take them both. Like, again, it depends on sort of how your league is going, but like I have them. I have both guys as mid third rounders in my top 200, which is available now on ESPN.com. Of course, I'm a company man.
Oh my goodness! I'm doing my job today, guys!
Oh my God! Secret squirrel.
I showed up.
Yes, you did, brother. Look at you, secret squirrel. Well done. So yeah, I mean, like, for me, I have both as mid third rounders, but I'd be fine with Dak in the fifth as well. Again, I have a lot of Dak this year. I'm in because, by the way, if you look at his yards per attempt last year, if you look at his deep completion percentage, all very, very high, and then you add a big play guy in CeeDee Lamb. We'll talk about him in a little bit. But again, like, he did all that last year with Randall Cobb, and I would argue that CeeDee Lamb at this stage of both their respective careers is, by the end of the year, going to be an upgrade over Randall Cobb from last year.
All right, so Dak somewhere in the fifth round is about where you're comfortable taking him, and I'm not too far off there. Again, I have a number 4 in my overall quarterback ranks. We had a conversation about Dalvin Cook last week, and then we talked about Saquon Barkley yesterday on the podcast. Of course, you can find all of our podcasts wherever you download your podcast. Go listen to them all. Let's talk about Ezekiel Elliott, because the conversation for number 1 this year in fantasy football is not all that compelling. Take Christian McCaffrey. I think from a process standpoint, not taking Christian McCaffrey is a faulty maneuver. He may not finish as number 1, but we would bet on it. But number 2 is really fascinating here, Matthew. Dalvin Cook, we talked about just how prolific he was as opposed to runner and receiver last year. Saquon Barkley, I think, is the most talented running back, not named Christian McCaffrey, or maybe including Christian McCaffrey in the NFL. Is it possible that Ezekiel Elliott, the case for number 2, is as strong and safe as any other player in fantasy football this year?
1,000%. You know, I'm starting to think about it, right? I mean, so I have Zeke at 3, and, you know, because I think Barkley and I have Barkley at 2. I think Barkley has a little bit more upside, a little, as you know, when we rank, when we're ranking for ESPN standard scoring, which is PPR, full PPR. And so, you know, you think about Barkley, who was top 10 in receptions per game, Zeke 16th. But again, Zeke getting more involved in the passing game, had 54 receptions last year. So, I mean, like, it's not that far off. And we know the volume is going to be there. I mean, this is a guy who has had over 300 touches the last 2 years. Right. I mean, like, he's double-digit touchdowns every single year that he plays all 16. Like, he, you know, and by the way, the only time he's missed this year was the suspension, right? I mean, in his career. I mean, he's a guy that
8 total games in his career. 6 of them were suspension.
Right.
The other 2 were week 17. We're sitting you because we have nothing to play.
Correct. 100%. So, like, for a guy that has as much, you know, physicality to his game and has gotten as much work as he's gotten, guy is healthy, right? And so it's just sort of like, whereas we saw Barkley get injured last year, and obviously Dalvin Cook has dealt with that. So I think in terms of safe and in terms of floor, I think it's Zeke, right? I mean, we think that that offense is the most consistent, right, of all the other guys, right? So there's some changes in Minnesota, obviously, as Gary Kubiak takes off as the offense coordinator. We expect it to be basically the same system, but still there's a little bit of a change there. And obviously Jason Garrett takes over the play calling in New York. We don't know exactly what that offense is going to look like with everyone healthy. We obviously expect Barkley to be the focal point. But Zeke is in the exact same situation as last year. He's got the exact same play caller. He's got all the guys around. The only difference there, is no Travis Frederick. And that makes somewhat of a difference.
Sure.
I mean, a very talented offensive lineman, right? I mean, and so for his career, Thirsty Kyle pulled these stats. For his career, with Travis Frederick in the lineup, touchdown rush every 25 carries, touchdown on 21% of red zone carries. Without Frederick in the lineup, touchdown rush every 50 carries, touchdown on 12% of red zone carries. Now, again, that's small sample size. And
I would push back on that because would you take Zeke again? If you got what you got last year out of Zeke, would you take him again?
100%. Right. And
last
Frederick
year there was no
right.
Travis
Yeah,
Frederick.
of
So
course.
we agree. Ezekiel Elliott is, to me, he's the NFL's workhorse. He is the NFL's workhorse.
So I'm gonna push this back on you then. Okay. What's the argument for not taking Zeke at 2 with Saquon?
The upside that we were talking about, right? So you mentioned how Zeke is getting more involved in the passing game. He was actually less involved last year, 54 catches, like Saquon Barkley, and you gave the stat.
I guess I meant more over his
basis.
career. Like his first year, he didn't catch very much, and so like just for his career, feels like
Saquon a more explosive runner. Like you're going to get more points on 50-plus yard runs, which are not the only reason why fantasy football backs are useful. But I'm just saying the upside for Saquon just feels higher to me than the upside with Zeke from a explosive playability, volume of catches, and I think the touchdowns could be close this year because, as we talked about yesterday, we think the Giants' offense, if it stays healthy, and that's been a big if for them, could be fairly explosive. So I still have Saquon number 2, but if you took Zeke at number 2, I wouldn't say a word. I would just say, bravo, move on to pick number 2.
Especially because we talk about how you can't win your league in the first round, you can lose it. If you want to go safety, and that's one of the things I've been preaching this year, obviously, especially with everything going on with COVID-19 and everything like that, like, Zeke is the safest of those 3 guys. I think he's certainly got by far the highest floor. One last thing, I just want to ask you about this. And I have no stats to back this up. This is just a conversation real quickly. So Dak's playing for a deal, right? And look, we know Dak's going to get paid, right? But Dak's on a 1-year deal. He's on a franchise tag. He wants to be the highest paid quarterback in the NFL, like most quarterbacks that are at the
number 2
level. Right. Yes. He's probably not going to get $500 million. Right. Yeah, sorry. Correct. Forgot about the Mahomes deal. Co-owner of the Kansas City Royals, Patrick Mahomes. Right. So, second highest paid player in the NFL, or second highest paid quarterback, however you want to put it. And, but do you think, because I've heard this talk with some quarterbacks, when they get in close, Dak controls the line of scrimmage. When they get in close, Dak's going to be like, you know what? I'm not giving it to Zeke. I'm going to keep it myself. I'm going to do like a little slant to AMARI or something like that. I want to pad my stats by 5 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, take some cheapos for myself this year.
No, don't think that's, first of all, Dak Prescott's an incredibly selfless human, and he's shown that leadership, I mean, since his days at Mississippi State. Highest of high character for Dak Prescott. I don't think, because you know what's going to help Dak Prescott more than a couple of extra touchdowns? Winning games. And he's going to do what I think is the highest percentage play for the Cowboys to help win. And Matthew, he could be terrible this year and still make a ton of money next year. Yep. The most important thing for Dak Prescott to get paid next year is staying healthy. That is the most important thing for him to stay healthy. So I'm not convinced there's going to be any sort of cheapo touchdowns taken away from Zeke. But let's move forward to the wide receivers, Matthew, because I need to preface this by saying that AMARI Cooper is this wonderful talent, right? He is exceptional. Not only was he, at one point, the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft, might have been 3rd, excuse me.
Right.
He also was traded for a first-round pick. So 2 separate teams have seen the investment of a first-round pick be worthwhile for them. The Cowboys are paying him $22 million, and you know what? And
Washington wanted to pay him more.
Washington wanted to pay him even more than $22 million.
I blame Bruce Allen for not landing AMARI Cooper.
But let me ask you this question.
Yes, sir.
And so again, incredibly complimentary. Is it possible that at wide receiver 10, AMARI Cooper is being overvalued in fantasy? That's where he is in terms of ADP right now. Is it possible that he's being overvalued right now?
Not only is it possible, it is.
Yeah.
He is. Like, so my love-hate list, I'm working on my love-hate list right now, my preseason love-hate list, and AMARI Cooper is going to be on it. Now, to be clear, I think AMARI Cooper is a very talented NFL wide receiver. I think AMARI Cooper is going to have a very good fantasy football year, right? We just talked up Dak, and he's going to be the #1 receiver for Dak. But love-hate is all about ADP, right? And fantasy football is all about finding value.
Yep.
And so I don't think you can have the AMARI Cooper conversation without talking about Michael Gallup.
Well,
so hang on.
Okay,
so let me just do this, right?
Yep.
Let me just do this. So last year, For the season, per game averages, Michael Gallup missed a couple games due to injury, but for the season, Amari Cooper, 4.9 catches a game, Gallup 4.7. Cooper, 7.4 targets a game, Gallup 8.1. Cooper, 74 yards a game, Gallup 79 yards a game. Cooper, 15 fantasy points per game, 15.4. Michael Gallup, 15.2. And then you look at the post week 8 bye. So Michael Gallup got injured early in the season. He was up and down. They had a bye in week 8. From week 9 on, Michael Gallup had more targets, more yards, and more touchdowns. He averaged 15.3 fantasy points per game. Amari Cooper, 12.9 fantasy points per game. And I'm not sitting here, Field, telling you that Michael Gallup is a better player than Amari Cooper, or that even that he's going to have a better fantasy year than Amari Cooper. What I am telling you, though, is that at the respective ADPs, Michael Gallup is a much better fantasy football value than Amari Cooper. I think they're going to be very close in production, and I'd much rather have Michael Gallup, who's currently going as wide receiver 31, than Amari Cooper, who's going as wide receiver 10. Remember, Amari Cooper last year, 5 different games with under 7 fantasy points. The inconsistency for a guy that you're using a top 10 pick on at the position is concerning to me.
Yeah, so to illustrate that point you just made at the very end, one step further, there's 5 games you just said that Amari Cooper had 7 or fewer fantasy points. Actually, under 7 fantasy points. There are 9 wide receivers being drafted ahead of Amari Cooper right now in terms of ADP. Those 9 receivers combined for 11 games last year of 7 or fewer fantasy points. So if you make it the top 10, it's 16 total games, and 5 of them belong to Amari Cooper. There's just such good value. His weekly finishes last year, here are some of them. This is from starting in week 1. 16, 38, 35, 3, 94, 17, 13, 4, 54, 98, 22, 12, 88, 55, 28. All right, so I think we agree.
Right.
Excellent
player.
And
that was in a year in which the Cowboys offense was clicking, in which Dak had a monster year. Like, again, so right. We both are pro Amari Cooper, the player. Neither of us are pro Amari Cooper, the fantasy football value.
I think that's a fair way of putting it. I'm a little bit less optimistic, though, on Michael Gallup than you are. I do want to note that Michael Gallup...
Blasphemy.
No,
go ahead.
Well, but I was...
Go ahead. Speak your lies.
Also, he finished the season with the best game of his career, right? He had 6 catches, 3 of them were for touchdowns. So some of his last year data, I think, is a little bit inflated because of that. And so wide receiver 31, as you referenced, is ADP. I've got him at 34. You're at 22. Now, I just think there's a possibility that you talked about CeeDee Lamb earlier. Like, Michael Gallup had a ton of targets last year. That was really solid. But how much does CeeDee Lamb sort of bite into the value of Michael Gallup? Is it possible that CeeDee Lamb takes away, I don't know, I mean, let's say whatever Randall Cobb's targets were plus 20 this season, like 20 extra targets that go away?
Maybe, but I think it's that double-edged sword, right? Are there, does he lose some target share to CeeDee Lamb? Okay, but then there's less defensive attention, right? Does Gallup get maybe some more single coverage, or get in a more favorable spot because they have to deal with CeeDee Lamb in a way they didn't have to with Randall Cobb? Worth noting last year that there were 6 games last season in which Randall Cobb ran 30 or more routes. So we'll call that a healthy week, right?
Okay.
In those 6 games, he averaged 13.2 fantasy points per game. That's wide receiver 31 on a per game basis. Again, so that's CeeDee Lamb. So that's what Randall Cobb did last year. CeeDee Lamb's currently going as wide receiver 45. We think there's more upside there. My point here, Field, is that I believe this offense is explosive enough that it can support 3 fantasy relevant wide receivers. Given that I'm counting the 3rd fantasy relevant wide receiver as a top 40 guy.
We'll see. Yeah, I definitely think it's possible that CeeDee Lamb reaches top 40 weekly. I'm not drafting him as such right now going into the season because there's just such great depth at the wide receiver spot across the NFL.
There is. I will push back here on Michael Gallup. I understand what you're saying in terms of stats being inflated. I will just say if you take numbers out of it, I just think the kid's an impressive player.
Really impressive player.
From the eye test going into his 3rd year in the NFL, he's improved every year. I just think he's a big body guy, runs routes well, clearly has a connection with Dak. so I have him at wide receiver 22. His ADP is wide receiver 31. So I'm in on Michael Gallup. He's one of my guys this year.
Sure.
He will be on the love list. And I certainly love Michael Gallup when you compare his ADP to Amari Cooper.
I would agree on that part. Matthew, we like to have fun with tight ends on the show every once in a while.
We do?
Now you get, and I was told, this has been told to me specifically, you have 30 seconds to talk about Blake Jarwin. Ready?
Wait, hang on. Let's put 30 seconds on the clock.
I got it right here.
Squirrel.
Ready?
Yeah.
Wait, hang on. Wait. Before we start, can we two-box it? Can we two-box it or put a timer on? There we go. All right, Secret Squirrel. There you go.
Here we go.
There's your
ready?
iPhone that looks a little beat up, to be honest. Like, you know.
Brand new. I got
it
it 4 days ago.
Is it really? Well, because your screen looks. Get a screen protector or something.
I got a
It's
screen
all
protector.
scratched up.
Those are my fingerprints.
Is that
I don't
what it
think
is?
that I can trust any. Your eyes are 160 years old, and you're
Right.
40 feet away from me, and I'm trusting you to look at my iPhone and
It
tell
just
me how
looks
better.
dirty.
Oh
it just feels.
Maybe your eyes are dirty. Maybe scrub your eyes down.
There, but I'm
and
just-
go.
I'm just-
We're starting. Go.
Fine.
You better hurry.
Blake Jarwin, 6'5", 6'5", 246 pounds. Remember, people forget this. Jason Witten leaves now. He's in Las Vegas. 63 catches, 85 targets. That's what he had. Cowboys, 8th among tight end in catches. Here's a guy playing for the Cowboys that was 7th in tight end receptions, 9th in tight end targets, 12th in tight end yards. It's a nice role that Blake Jarwin's going to have for himself. 6 touchdown receptions on his 58 career grabs. 10% of his receptions have gone for a touchdown. Give me some Blake Jarwin as a late-round sleeper.
He got a nice contract this offseason. We're going to come back.
They
and
like
talk
Blake
about,
Jarwin in Dallas. They do indeed.
We're going to talk about the Eagles in just a moment. But first, Matthew, a word from you.
Oh, hang on. Is the word from me about Blake Jarwin? Can it be about Blake Jarwin?
It is
Can I
not.
just do a
Over
30-second
30
live
seconds.
read about Blake Jarwin?
Cannot. No.
All right,
Not
fair
unless
enough.
Blake Jarwin calls in and sponsors a live read.
All right. Well, I don't know if Blake Jarwin would be willing to do that, but if he would, maybe he would be talking about the Volvo XC40, which has a place for everything, and I mean everything, with smart storage features like a wireless phone charger. Secret Squirrel. Maybe you could keep like some wipes for your dirty phone there as well next to that wireless phone charger. A fold-out hook on the glove box for bags, card holder slots for IDs, parking passes, a compartment under the driver's seat for your tablet, a rear cargo divider that folds up to keep things secure. The Volvo XC40 has a space for all your must-haves and then some.
This summer is going to be unlike any other. And while some of our favorite events might be postponed, summer certainly is not. Social distancing has pressed pause on many of our typical plans and left us feeling like summer is postponed too. But again, it's not. Summer is still out there. You'll just have to work a little bit harder to find it. And Coors Light wants to make it easier for you to chill this summer and give you a break from the stress and pressures of daily life. Plus, the new Coors Light Summer Can does the work for you. It features sunglasses that literally turn blue when the beer is cold and ready to drink. That's why Coors Light is what you need when you need a moment of chill. So when you want to reset this summer, reach for the beer that's made to chill. You can have Coors Light delivered by going to get.coorslight.com and finding local delivery options near you. Celebrate responsibly. Coors Brewing Company, Golden, Colorado.
Oh, sorry about that, Matthew.
No, go ahead, play a song.
Well, there's no music, there's no words, so I can talk over top of this part. We established that at the pre-show.
Nice. So I have
Gotta
two
learn.
things. Before we move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, I have two things.
Sure.
I have two items on the agenda that I would like to address. Number one is we didn't get to talk Tony Pollard. So I would just like 30 seconds here just to discuss Tony Pollard, who I think is one of the most important insurance guys that you can grab, backups that you can grab.
Okay.
If anything were to happen to Ezekiel Elliott, Tony Pollard would immediately be a top 5 running back for me. We have seen the explosiveness in that offense, being the lead back in the Cowboys offense.
Maybe not quite top 5, but probably top 10 for me.
Yeah, certainly. Look, here's a guy that, again, this is all small sample size, but we've just seen it. He's gained 5 or more yards on 46.5% of his carries. That is the best rate among all running backs with at least 75 carries last year in 2019. 3 different games with 14 or more touches, had over 125 total yards and a touchdown in 2 of those 3 games. Again, just from the eye test, he's an explosive running back. They like Tony Pollard a lot in Dallas. And so if you're looking for a late round flyer, or if you invested a high draft pick in Ezekiel Elliott, I think Tony Pollard is important insurance. I think he's going undrafted in over 80% of ESPN leagues, and I think that is a mistake. So that is the first piece of business on my agenda.
Number 2.
Number 2 is I have a favor, a request, a por favor of the audience, of the 06010 fam.
Homework.
Yeah, if you guys wouldn't mind. We are at, this is important apparently. this is not for my ego. This is important to basically, is that could you guys go to iTunes or go to wherever it is you listen to this podcast and give us a 5-star review? Give us a 5-star review. That's all we're asking here, because again, it helps in the rankings. It helps us keep the show free. We can show it to advertisers, the whole thing. It helps all of us out, and it's free for you to do. So it'll take you 20 seconds. Just give a 5-star review. You can say you like Field better than me. You can say you like Daniel Dopp. You can say you like every one of the show except me. But just give us a 5-star review, because that does help us with the folks over there at Apple.
Immensely. It certainly does. We appreciate any support we get. So now let's talk about the Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to bring the wonderful owner and sole resident of Chateau de Cone.
Well, Rico's there.
That's right. Rico is there as well. But the queen of Chateau de Cone, Stephania Bell, is back with us. And Stephania, when we talk about the Eagles, we talk about Carson Wentz. Now, we also talk about the fact that Carson Wentz has not finished a season with Philadelphia in quite some time because of injuries. Where is he at in the recovery from that very scary back injury that, of course, knocked him out late in the postseason against Seattle last year?
He's actually in good shape. He's healthy coming into this season. And he actually, to give him credit, he did play all 16 regular season games last year and then suffered a concussion during the playoffs. But if you look at Carson Wentz, he's really poised, if everyone stays healthy around him, to have a bounce-back season. After he tore his ACL and LCL in 2017, you really saw him drop off in fantasy because he just wasn't the same guy in 2018. He missed the first 2 games coming back. He wasn't running the ball like he used to, and then he struggled with the back injury. And last year, you saw him running the ball quite a bit more. He looked much more confident moving around. The problem was he lost like all 3 of his top wide receivers. As early as week 2, he had ALSHON Jeffrey down and Deshaun Jackson down. So I think when you look at Carson Wentz, you have to really look at him in the context of what he has around him. And obviously they've added some depth at wide receiver, some insurance, if you will, in case guys get injured again. But as far as his health goes, I think he's in really good shape coming into this year.
Stephania, just a quick question here. You think Carson Wentz is in really good shape coming into this year. What kind of shape am I in coming into this year?
Do I have to answer that?
Yeah,
Round.
I just asked you a direct question.
I think round is the shape that Matthew is this year.
He's in round shape.
See,
that's fair. I'm in round shape.
For you, I can't really see you
Right.
Through my camera right now. And so I just going by, when I rewatch the show, as I always do.
Of course.
Afterward.
Oh, yeah.
You look very good on the couch.
Okay.
That's fair enough. I was going to say, listen, I'm just excited that I have a shape, because there have been times in my life where I haven't. It's just kind of been like a very shapeless blob that I am. So, yeah.
It's probably good that there's distancing requirements, so you and Field aren't sitting right next to each other.
100%. I wouldn't want my dad bod fat to lay over onto him. What?
So I do have a question about Carson Wentz, if you guys don't mind me indulging.
Yeah. Well, so you have him at 8, Secret Squirrel.
Hold on. He wants to ask Stephania.
I do, but I want to. I want a
Okay.
medical question from Stephania. So one of the things, obviously, Matthew Stafford, somebody that I know and I'm very a huge fan of, but the idea that early in his career, Matthew Stafford had a number of injuries that kind of felt like they weren't necessarily related, but maybe he was injury prone, and we weren't really sure, trying to figure that out. Is Carson Wentz similar to that Matthew Stafford situation where he's just been unlucky and they've been different parts of his body, or is this a situation where, like Matthew Stafford, or not like Matthew Stafford, it's just injury prone or soft tissue or bad tissue?
I don't think it's fair to label him as injury prone, even though I've seen people do that. You remember the ACL injury he had was a result of contact, which is not typically how they happen, but he was trying to dive towards the end zone and took a helmet to his head and basically rearranged the shape of his knee. The back injury, it's hard to say. That may have been helped along, if you will, by the fact that he was not using his leg the same way. Maybe he was torquing through his back a little bit. It's really hard to know whether that's definitively connected or not, or maybe just exacerbated by the leg. But now he had a really good year last year. Again, getting through all 16 games, a concussion in the playoffs. But if he can put together another strong season like this where he stays healthy, and they've had some offensive line turnover, so that's something to watch. But if he can do that for a couple years in a row, then I certainly think you could put him in the same category as Matthew Stafford.
Stephania, hang tight. We'll come back to you in just a moment to talk about some Eagles wide receivers. But let's talk more about Wentz here. And let me just state, by the way, I referenced the injury last year as a back injury. It was a concussion in the playoffs, as Stephania astutely noted. But, all right, so the Eagles have much better, I think, skill players on paper this year than they did last year, even with Marquise Goodwin opting out of the season, and as of right now, Alshon Jeffrey on the PUP list. Last year at this time, Matthew, when people were wondering who could be the next Patrick Mahomes, one of the most popular picks was Carson Wentz. Is there a reason to believe that because of the offensive players around him, because of his health, that Carson Wentz is a strong candidate to finish the season as a top 5 quarterback? Because both you and I have him outside our top 10, identically at the number 11 quarterback spot.
So, right, we have him right there at 11, and I think he's fine to go anywhere from 8 to 12. My concern is, and listen, first off, just from a general NFL standpoint, Carson Wentz can play. Carson Wentz can play. I mean, last year, I thought this is an impressive stat. Last year, he was the first player in NFL history to have 4,000 passing yards in a season without a 500-yard wide receiver. Again, I mean, we talked about it at the top of the show. Like, I mean, they were rolling out Greg Ward who had, like, I forget, was he like an Orlando Apollo? I forget where he had started his, I don't know.
Practice squad guy.
He was in AAF. I mean, he was in the AAF. I mean, seriously. So, you know, they were just trying to find bodies, you know, and it was a revolving door there. So there is that. And we've certainly seen him have fantasy success. And it's a good offense, a lot of weapons, and Doug Peterson is a pass-first coach. Yep. He is a former NFL quarterback, comes from the Andy Reid school. He is a pass-first, fantasy-friendly coach. So certainly that's all there. And, I mean, again, I have him at 11. My concern on Carson Wentz is, yes, I understand Stephania saying he's unlucky. He's not injury-prone. He's unlucky. But until he gets lucky, he is somebody that has struggled to stay on the field, luck or not, right? He's a guy that doesn't seem to have a ton of upside, at least so far. Like, you know, last year had only one top 5 finish, right? And, Thirsty Kyle texted me. He was a San Antonio Commander. Okay. Greg Ward was a San Antonio Commander. So there you go. Shout out to the AAF. And the other thing is, by the way, like, I feel like the rushing has gone down a little bit. Thirsty Kyle, what is the rushing on, let's go to the bunker. Thirsty Kyle, what is the rushing on Carson Wentz since he came into the NFL? Because I feel like it's gone down.
He had 75 attempts last year. Yeah. So, I mean, that's
pretty good.
Or 62, I'm sorry, 62 rush attempts, but he's been oscillating in that 3 to 4 attempt per game routine, so not too much upside.
The only thing that you mentioned that I might push back on, though, is the upside. And you're right. The stat about him having only one top 5 finish last year is notable. But I do think, I mean, we have seen maybe peak Carson Wentz before. I mean, a few years ago when he was probably going to be the NFL's MVP, if not for the Week 14 ACL tear. So now, if you're going to now ask me, well, then why don't I have him higher in my quarterback rankings?
Why don't you have him higher in your quarterback rankings?
Simply that if you look at the players that are ahead of him, you're talking about quarterbacks that are either much more dynamic runners, much more dynamic, have much more dynamic weapons, or a combination of the both, right? So, like, Tom Brady's got better weapons, obviously, around him in Tampa Bay. A guy like Drew Brees, same thing in New Orleans. I mean, maybe not totally better, but still, Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara by themselves are excellent. So, and then you got guys like
Emmanuel
Kyler
Sanders
Murray.
is a nice player.
Sure. Kyler Murray, who's a great runner, etc. So, I think there is enough upside.
Or even, I mean, here's the other thing. There's 2 other things here that I would say. Like, so, or even, you know, Matt Ryan. So Matt Ryan, by the way, who's another guy that's going ahead of him that I have ranked ahead of Carson Wentz because I think the Falcons are going to have a bad defense. And I mean, again, Julio, Calvin Ridley, we like Hayden Hurst, Todd Gurley out of the backfield. Here's the other thing. I think the Eagles' defense could be really good this year.
Well, that was
and so I just don't think they're going to get into a bunch of shootouts as well.
Right. They may have less opportunities like last year. That stat that we flash on a graphic for those that are watching the live stream, but attempt, which is not really like an often used quarterback stat, but it's pretty notable, which chances is how we described it, which is attempts plus rushing attempts, passing attempts and rushing attempts. And it's useful for fantasy football. It is a volume game in a lot of ways. So I think we see it the same way on Carson Wentz, an interesting player that is ranked, depending on who you follow, somewhere between 8 and 12 amongst quarterbacks. But it's a really, really compelling conversation surrounding his running back, which is Miles Sanders. And his ADP right now is 7th amongst running backs. And Matthew, I know this because you've already talked about this in some form on offseason podcasts. Miles Sanders is being overdrafted in your estimation.
100%. And so I want to be very clear here. Miles Sanders is a really talented NFL player.
Yep.
And so he's going to be on my hate list this year. And people are going to be like, like people are going to freak out. And when Miles Sanders has a good year, he's going to have a good year. They're going to throw that back in my face. And I'm just going to be like, yeah, but I don't think he's going to be worth a top 7 pick, which is where he's going. I have him at running back 14. You have him at 16. Secret Squirrel has him at 15. So we all have him as a mid-tier RB2. And it's not about the talent, but it's about the scheme here. Doug Peterson, in 4 years as the head coach of the Philadelphia Eagles, okay, I think he's had, let me see if I can find the exact stat here. I want to say I think he's had 4 different games. I'm sorry, only 3 times. It's only 3. Only 3 times in Doug Peterson's Eagles coaching career has a running back gotten more than 20 carries in a game. Okay? You think about...
3 times in 3 seasons?
4.
4 seasons. Wow.
He's been an NFL coach, right? I believe he's been an NFL coach for 4 seasons.
Correct. Yep, that's right. You're right.
3 times in 4 years, a running back has gotten more than 20 carries. And I understand he's part of the passing game, so I get it, and we're just talking carries here. But still, when Jordan Howard was active last year, and I know it was his rookie year, he got 11 touches a game. The stat that I see quoted quite a bit about Miles Sanders is that the final 6 games, he was an absolute beast. He was a fantasy superstar. Again, he was competing for touches with Zach Ertz, who was limping along, right? And San Antonio Commander Greg Ward. You know, they had Dallas Goedert. I mean, they just didn't have a lot of weapons there. Boston Scott, by the way, was a top 7 fantasy running back from week 14 on last year. We're going to draft Boston Scott in the top 7 as well? I mean, if we're going to use that, like, I'm just saying, like, Doug Peterson throughout his career has been a running back by committee guy. And I don't know, and the argument against is like, well, he's never had a guy like Miles Sanders. Okay, but like, I remember last year people were like, Bruce Arians, what about O.J. Howard? Bruce Arians doesn't use tight ends. And they're like, well, he's never had a guy like O.J. Howard. How'd that work out? I'm just, Miles Sanders is a really talented running back. I think he's going to be a top 20 fantasy running back this year. But the idea that he's being drafted ahead of true workhorse backs that have a much larger sample size than 6 games is insane to me.
One last, Daniel, I want to get you in here in a second. One last thing to add about the potential for a less than workhorse role for Miles Sanders is this is a team that studied Devontae Freeman this offseason. They studied Carlos Hyde. They were linked to LaShawn McCoy again. So nothing has happened yet. But if they were to sign, for example, Devontae Freeman, which is something that many on the internet have speculated would make sense, then maybe we see his ADP start to correct a little bit. Daniel, anything you want to add before we move on?
I think I just disagree a little bit on the Miles Sanders argument. I've actually moved him up a couple slots because I feel like if I'm looking at Austin Eckler, who I don't think is a workhorse running back, but I've got him as a like RB8, what is it that I'm seeing differently? Right, and so can Miles Sanders also not be between his rushing and his passing? I look at the two, and I think there may be a little bit more comparison there. I'd rather have the Eagles offense and Carson Wentz a quarterback than Austin Eckler, but I've got Austin Eckler at 7.
Special as a pass catcher.
I would say,
right?
I would say exactly. Austin Eckler is a special player as a pass catcher, and understand that last year he was for the first 4 weeks of the season last year before Melvin Gordon showed up.
Yep.
Austin Eckler was the 2nd best running back in fantasy, and in fact, those first 4 games, he scored 5 fantasy points less than Christian McCaffrey. Like, he was within 5 points of Christian McCaffrey. That's what Austin Eckler did over that 4-game stretch. Melvin Gordon came in, and then from once Melvin Gordon was back, he was still like the 5th best running back in fantasy. And now Melvin Gordon's obviously in Denver.
Yep.
And so I actually feel much better about Austin Eckler's workload this year than I do about Miles Sanders. It's not about talent, but I do think Eckler's a special player like I do Sanders.
Sure.
I'm just going to say that, like, again, Doug Peterson, like, through the first 9 weeks of last season, when everyone was basically healthy, the carry share for the Eagles, Jordan Howard got 44% of the carries. Miles Sanders got 28%. Like, he couldn't beat out Jordan Howard last year, and I get it, he was a rookie, but if he's the next Saquon, which is what a lot of people were saying, like, he was better than Saquon at Penn State. Like, people were saying that. Field, you're smiling, but people were saying that, right?
I want those people to come talk to me.
No, but I mean, but I understand, like, we don't agree with that statement, but there were people that said that.
Yeah,
there are Miles Sanders truthers that were saying that, and I'm not saying Miles Sanders is a bad running back. Again, I think he's a very talented NFL running back, but I'm just saying that, like, he couldn't, the guy that a lot of people were touting as good or better than Saquon couldn't beat out Jordan Howard when both guys were healthy.
It's not, but we don't necessarily know it's a couldn't
not.
beat out. I think it could be a coaching decision as a
I was
running back.
gonna say,
Well, they wanted a committee guy.
Well,
they
as
want
that,
they
it's
want a
just coaches
committee.
are just we see this all the time in the NFL. Coaches are deferential frequently to veteran running backs who can help them out of the gates.
We should just be
Adrian
coaches.
Peterson amongst the likes that do that exactly for their team. All right, so let's go to the wide receivers here. And before
Very quickly,
we
do you like Boston Scott at all?
That's another one,
Before we move
Haley.
off the thing?
That's an interrupt.
I'm okay with a late round flyer on again, put him in the bucket, but let's reevaluate this in 3 weeks if the Eagles still have no other veteran running back on their roster.
Fair enough. I will just say if they don't, Boston Scott will have a role. Again, it's going to be Sanders will be the lead running back of best running back by committee, but Boston Scott will have a role in this offense. Like Darren Sproles plus.
Let's get Stephania back in the mix here. And Stephania, with the Philadelphia Eagles wide receivers, you have to talk about ALSHON Jeffrey, and that often means that we're consulting you because he has had a lot of injuries in his NFL career. What is the latest on ALSHON Jeffrey and any other Eagles wide receivers injuries that might concern you at the moment?
ALSHON Jeffrey, I mean, you guys know he's like a favorite topic of mine because it feels like I'm talking about him all the time, especially on Sundays. That's always been the concern, is he's a question mark a lot. Now, a few years ago, he played all 16 games and they ended up winning a Super Bowl, but he had to have rotator cuff surgery after the season. That impaired him a little bit the following year. This last year, he got hurt out of the gate. Week 2, he had an injury, a calf injury that cost him a couple weeks. He came back. He was out again later in the season. Then he had a foot injury that placed him on IR, and he had surgery in December, a Lisfranc surgery. Lengthy timeline on the recovery process here. We don't have a lot of details about the surgery, but again, for an older wide receiver, having this complex of a surgery, you really don't know what he's going to be able to do when the season starts. Placed on the PUP list to start training camp, I think it's going to be a progression back for him. And again, he's one of those that we really want to see him in action before we feel confident about what he can actually do as a wide receiver this year. Of course, you have to mention Deshaun Jackson too, right? Because he had a season that really was cost completely by this groin injury that he had early on, and he ended up not playing multiple games and having surgery in December to repair that core muscle, the groin injury that he had. All the reports are that he's doing great now, but again, you talk about an older receiver, he's 33. I think he's played all 16 games only twice in his 12 years, and if you look at the most recent seasons, that's where he's missed the most time. Largely soft tissue injuries, hamstring, groin, abdomen, and you have to wonder if, wow, somebody's back in business.
Stephania, one of us had to show up and be prepared for the show today. Obviously, it needed to be me.
Yeah.
All right,
Nice.
So anyway, you have to be a little concerned about the risk factor for Deshaun Jackson, even if he starts the season healthy, because he hasn't been able to finish lately.
So, Stephania, the question I always ask you, even with a late round flyer, would you draft ALSHON Jeffrey or Deshaun Jackson on any of your fantasy teams this year?
I'm staying, probably not. No. But you know me, risk averse.
Exactly, that's why I asked.
I think. I know. A lot depends on what ALSHON is doing at the end of training camp if my draft is late. If I'm doing it now, why would I? Because there's potential that he doesn't even start the season. And Deshaun Jackson, again, I don't know that it's worth it for me to take a gamble on someone who's had that many soft tissue injuries. I'll take the young guy.
We'll talk to you in just a little.
Rager.
We'll talk to Stephania in just a moment to get involved in some trivia. But I'm sensing that there was zero clean bells of health right there on the Eagles wide receivers. So let's talk about the fantasy, Matthew. And we had this conversation yesterday with the Giants, and they have 3 wide receivers who are on the fantasy radar, and we sort of assigned which one was the best value. So we'll do the same with the Eagles. Jalen Rager was the 21st overall pick out of TCU, was going at wide receiver 53, but he's actually undrafted in 50% of leagues. ALSHON Jeffrey is going as undrafted in 80% of leagues right now. Wow, undrafted in 80% of leagues.
Can I ask, I'm going to interrupt you and ask a question. You can count that one. It's fine. It's fine, Haley. Count that. Here's my question for you, sir. We'll get back to this. I want you to put on your NFL Insider hat.
Yeah.
Your newsbreaker hat. At Field Yates on Twitter, always breaking news. Is ALSHON? Oh.
So
I was so close to nailing that, man.
Oh, close. Go ahead. So put on your newsbreaker hat. Okay.
It smells nice.
I bet it does.
Okay,
All
it's
right.
on.
Dang it.
Just need a little scoop.
Field looks so good in a hat. Why did I give him that? Man, I look so
gotta
dumb
start
in
wearing
that hat, and he
hats
looks so
Does.
beautiful and
I know.
Wearing
handsome.
hats more.
Very upsetting. You have a hat head.
Yeah.
Actually, you do look good in a hat. It's
Start
very
wearing 'em.
upsetting. You know
On
who he
tomorrow's
looks?
show.
He's kind of got a Rob Lowe thing going. In the
Yeah.
hat.
I'll take
You
that.
do. You totally
literally
I
look like Rob Lowe.
You literally look like
do. You
that.
look like Rob Lowe and Tommy Boy. That's exactly what he looks like right now.
I'm hearing
Or
Jim
Carrey. I'm hearing from
wow.
Haley.
Depends
All
on
right,
which Jim Carrey we're
we got 10
talking
minutes. We got a lot to
Yeah,
get
Dumb
through
and
still.
Dumber?
Is it the
talking-
mask Jim
Yeah.
Carrey? You know, or like right, you know, right? Is it or Dumb and Dumber Jim Carrey?
Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, listen, my friend. So I want you in your newsbreaker hat. Is there a chance ALSHON Jeffrey does not play for the Eagles this year? Either
At this point, I don't believe so.
Okay.
Alshon Jeffrey's contract is fully guaranteed or basically guaranteed for this year. They restructured his deal about a year ago, and the commitment they made was while he was due less money over the life of the contract, he has guarantees in 2020 that make it very prohibitive for them to move on from Alshon Jeffrey this year. So let's finish this thought then. Alshon Jeffrey, undrafted in 80% of leagues. Deshaun Jackson, ADP of wide receiver 57, undrafted in nearly 60% of leagues. Matthew, which of these wide receivers represents the best value in your drafts?
I actually think Alshon Jeffrey.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I know everyone's like about Jalen Reagor, but I'm worried he's going to be more Deshaun Jackson-like, which is, you know, that he'll be big play dependent. I don't know that he's going to have consistent fantasy value. Listen, I think the pass catchers you want on the Eagles this year are Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert.
We'll get to that
But
in one
yeah,
moment,
but for me, I mean, Alshon Jeffrey, even if he misses the first 6 games, when he's out there and he's a little bit too touchdown dependent at this point of his career, but like he's basically free. And we know when they get in close, he's one of the guys that Carson Wentz always looks for.
Yeah, I'm with you there, 100%. And I get it. There are so many reasons not to draft Alshon Jeffrey. Stephania's caution is going to be heeded by a lot of people smartly. But undrafted in 80% of leagues, you might use your last round pick on Alshon Jeffrey for a guy who at one point was a top, 12 to 18 wide receiver in the league, depending on the week.
19 touchdowns in 39 games. He averages over 7 targets a game.
Yeah,
which is
I'm
top 30
in. I'm
the NFL.
in based
And
on
he's
value.
free.
I have him at 49. I actually kind of want to move Alshon Jeffrey further up the ladder, depending on when he is activated from the pup list. All right, let's talk about these tight ends in Philadelphia. And let me just start by saying this. I don't think that there has been slander about Zach Ertz this offseason. No, far from it. But I do think there's been a lack of appreciation. Zach Ertz might be one of, if not the most reliable tight ends in the NFL. The guy has been an absolute tour de force for Philadelphia whenever he has played over the past 3 years. Heck, even longer than that, past 6 years. However long he's been in the league. Catches a ton of passes. Incredible. Plays through pain. The dude is an absolute... He is a rock for them, right?
Right.
I still have him at tight end 3, Matthew, but I think some people are wondering, are the elite days of Zach Ertz as a fantasy football tight end over?
I don't think his days as an elite tight end are over.
Okay.
But I do think that his days as a top 3 guy may be. So like I move. So if you're watching this, you see that I have him at tight end 4. So I moved Mark Andrews ahead of him this year, and there's 2 reasons why. Number one is I love the upside of Mark Andrews. I think there's a very good chance that Mark Andrews leads one of the best passing offenses in the NFL in target share this year.
Yep.
Right. I mean, it's going to be him or Marquise Brown, and so as opposed to there's many mouths to feed in Philadelphia. The concerns on Ertz is, right, so you mentioned the injuries. He's missed at least 1 game in 4 of the last 5 seasons. You mentioned the upside here, right? So here's a guy that had no more than 65 receiving yards in 10 of 15 games last season, became a little bit too touchdown dependent for my taste, given where he's being drafted. And then I thought this was really interesting that Thirsty Kyle found. The percentage of games where he had under 13 fantasy points. 2017, it was just 21%. 2018, 44%. 2019, 47%. I can tell you that the Eagles front office and their coaching staff love with a capital L Dallas Goedert. It's not to say they don't love Zach Ertz. They do. All respect for Zach Ertz. But I'm just telling you that Goedert, they think, is somebody that's very special. And once again, I think we saw Goedert emerge somewhat last year. Very quietly, Dallas Goedert was a top 10 fantasy tight end. I'm just telling you, I think, I think target share comes down a little bit for Zach Ertz. Again, I have him at 4. You have to nitpick at this thing, but why did I move Mark Andrews ahead of Zach Ertz? That's why. I think the emergence of Dallas Goedert continues to eat into his production a little bit, as does the rest of the weapons around him. And I think Mark Andrews has more upside as what could be the focal point of one of the best passing offenses in the NFL. And the Eagles are going to be one of the best passing offenses too. But
I'm holding steady on Zach Ertz as a firm top 3 tight end option in fantasy football this year. I will note, I would wonder where that stat you gave about percentage of games under 13 points, where that moves, if it's 12 points as opposed to 13 points, because I can live with 12 points out of my tight end weekly. And he did, last season, lead tight ends in targets per game. So he still is a volume vacuum in Philadelphia. You mentioned...
Again, but they didn't have anyone. I mean, again, he was competing with Greg Ward, former San Antonio Commander Greg Ward for targets.
Right. And we have all these concerns about the wide receiver injuries. Let's quickly discuss Dallas Goedert, because he's right now being drafted as tight end 19 in terms of ADP. Daniel, I want to ask you this. You have him ranked inside your top 10 as a starter. You would feel comfortable going into a season with Dallas Goedert as your starting tight end?
Yeah, if I decided to just punt completely on the tight end position and I like what Dallas Goedert brings, when we look at these wide receivers that they've gotten, right? Like we've talked about how Carson Wentz has more weapons at his disposal this year than last year. But even with that, Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz seem to be the best 2 options on that offense for him. So I still think they're going to find ways with 2 tight end packages, not including Miles Sanders, obviously.
Sure.
So I still think they're going to use a lot of 2 tight end packages. I still think like they saw what they can get out of him. So if I'm going to say wait on the tight end position and some of the other guys go, I personally love getting Dallas Goedert towards the back end, and then hopefully you pair him, with someone in waivers or something like that. But I like him.
We think everybody here likes the talent. We talked about how the Eagles played more snaps last year in terms of percentage with 2 tight ends on the field.
And if Zach Ertz ever gets hurt, like he immediately steps into that role and becomes phenomenal.
1,000%.
I think this probably just comes down to what we discussed in previous shows, that like I'd probably prefer to have my lead tight end be a guy who is the clear-cut #1 tight end on his own offense going into the season.
But Dallas Goedert's another great example of, like, if you're not one of the first guys in the league to grab a tight end, be one of the last, because there are a lot of guys like Dallas Goedert that are going late in your drafts that, you can get by with 100%.
Did you know that right now, Geico is offering an extra 15% credit on motorcycle insurance? That's 15% on top of the money Geico could already save you. So what are you waiting for? Your dog to make you breakfast in bed? With Belgian waffles and a fresh fruit compote? As nice as that sounds, that's probably never going to happen. But at least there's never been a better time to switch to Geico. Save an extra 15% when you switch by October 7th. Visit geico.com to learn more.
Football is back, and so is HBO's Hard Knocks, the award-winning series that gives fans an all-access look at what it takes to make it in the National Football League. This season, for the first time ever, Hard Knocks will follow 2 teams, the Los Angeles Chargers and the Los Angeles Rams, as they make their way through training camp and prepare for the most unprecedented season in football history. Hard Knocks Los Angeles premieres Tuesday, August 11th at 10 p.m. That's tonight, guys, tonight! Tuesday, August 11th at 10 p.m. on HBO, and stream it on HBO Max. And be sure to listen to the official Hard Knocks podcast hosted by Peter Schrager every week, available where you download this fine podcast. All right, guys, that's it. We're going to go into the Geico trivia question for today. Thirsty Kyle from the bunker, go ahead and take it away.
And by the way, Stephania is taking part in this
joining
as well.
us.
She is.
Let's go to the Chateau de Belle, the Chateau de Cone.
Yeah, there he is. Kyle, what do you have for us?
All right, Amari Cooper and Michael Gallup both went over 200 PPR points last year. I want you to name for me the last Dallas Cowboy wide receiver duo to do that in a season.
Okay.
Simple, straightforward question.
Well, yeah, you wouldn't ask a simple question.
No, I wouldn't.
Okay, I definitely got this one wrong, but I want to give a shout out to the player. Who wants to go first? Stephania, you go first. Who do you got?
Yeah, ladies first.
Yeah, well, I'm the old one in the crew, so I don't know if this is right, but these guys burned my Niners in the 90s twice in the NFC Championship.
It's hard to read. So Alvin Harper
and Michael Irvin. Ooh,
Michael Irvin and Alvin Harper.
Wow, that's got to be it.
That may be it.
Matthew,
that's a good one.
With?
I have Des Bryant and Miles Austin.
Oh,
Miles Austin
okay.
was one of my first really good calls on Fantasy Football Now. I remember that game against Kansas City where he blew up.
ever, actually. But
I
yeah,
went so
Fantasy
far
Football
back.
Now.
Drew Pearson and Harold Carmichael. Drew Pearson belongs in the Hall of Fame, by the way. Get my man in the Hall of Fame. What's the answer?
Okay, Matthew got it half right, so I guess that makes him the winner.
Yeah, sure. I agree.
I'm half of a winner.
What?
Okay. Who is it?
Des Bryant and Lauren Robinson.
Yes. Oh, my God.
Wait,
went on to
who?
sign a
I can't
Laurent
hear.
Robinson.
Who is it?
Laurent Robinson. I
Went
remember
on
that
to sign a
year.
contract, a big one with the Jaguars. It did not pan out as planned. That right there is.
But
a
I
good
get half a
question.
point.
Matthew, for half appointment, you get 10 seconds for a crappy promo. Go.
All right, pretty good.
Rotopass.com. We added sharp football analysis. Our friend Warren Shopper is now a part of Rotopass.com. You can use the promo code 06010 for 10% off. We're very excited to announce that. So
Love that. We are back on Wednesday with more Double Trouble. Can the Patriots push forward without Tom Brady? And will Stephon Diggs light it up in Buffalo with the strong-arm quarterback Josh Allen? For Stephania, Daniel, Kyle, Matthew on field. Talk to you tomorrow.
peace out.
You're an 06010. Never gonna hustle, in case you didn't know. Matthew Berry, TMR.
You guys go ahead, give me grief for being on SportsCenter for 45 seconds.
I think you could do better than me because I don't think you could.